Hi, I'm Rachel, and I'm here to do my AM reading update for the week of May 7th through 13th, 2018. Well, to start with, just the other day I was holding up this book and saying that I would complete it this weekend. This is When They Came For Us Will Be Gone, The Epic Struggle to Save Soviet Jewry by Gail Beckerman, and I did not finish it this weekend, so shame on me, but I'll get to it, I'll finish it, it'll happen. What I did finish this weekend was this book, The Mars Room by Rachel Kushner. It was one of my anticipated reads for the year. I saw, press for it in late 2017 and thought it looked interesting. I thought it would be sort of an insular look at a women's correctional facility, and it is to a large degree, but it isn't strictly that, not in the way I thought it would be. It's a book where the main narrator, the first-person narrator, is Romy Hall, who does indeed serve a multiple life sentence for murdering her stalker. And then we move on to some other characters, always in third person in this case. We move on to one of her roommates, who's in and out of the system, usually for charges relating to supporting her drug habit. And we see a man in a male prison nearby who has a connection to one of the women on death row. We hear a lot about the other women sort of through Rumy's perspective. And we also get a perspective from Gordon Hausner, who is a teacher, basically, a civilian who comes in to teach the women, mostly so that they can get GEDs if they wanted. And Romy, he gets a little bit of a special bond with. She actually already is a high school graduate. Anyway, I'll be talking a little more about him later. Peg, I know that you were saying that you started this book, but the backstories were too depressing to continue with, and I can see where you're coming from. I mean, these women don't have easy lives, so it gets them into prison. So, yeah, I felt like I was a little more of a heart of stone in a way, reading this, like, eh. But it brings up all sorts of interesting questions. I mean, the big thing for me is about good versus evil and white hats versus black hats, and it always makes me a little wary because I don't want to step into moral relativity here, but I really dislike the idea of human beings being portrayed as purely good or purely evil. You know, acts are purely good or purely evil, or on that spectrum that way, but I really did appreciate that all of these characters felt like real human beings, that they weren't saints, but that didn't mean that they were all malicious psychopaths, and that's why they did what they did. They all seemed to have credible backstories. And this novel also touches into the idea of systematic issues and issues of repetitive lifestyles, that a lot of these people don't have lifestyles that are very different than the ones of their parents and their communities. So I thought I'd read from this section from Hausner's perspective, which spoke to me a lot, although I wonder if it's a little bit too on the nose and maybe inching a little bit into preachiness. I don't know, maybe because I think about these issues a lot, I didn't see it that way. It was something that I enjoyed grappling with, but I'll let you be the judge. It describes specific characters and also more of this systematic approach to violence with these individuals, but also what we accept in the community and in broader politics. The word violence was depleted and generic from overuse, and yet it still had power, still meant something, but multiple things. There were stark acts of it, beating a person to death, and there were more abstract forms, like depriving people of jobs, safe housing, adequate schools. There were large-scale acts of it, the deaths of tens of thousands of Iraqi civilians in a single year, for a specious war of lies and bungling, a war that might have no end. But according to prosecutors, the real monsters were teenagers like Button Sanchez. In the primitive part of the mind, violence was a body-to-body punching and clubbing and cutting. Those people went to prison, were not offered any kind of mercy. signed up for Gordon Hauser's class, did or did not do the reading. After indulging in the difficult facts, he all at once grasped why these kids, Button and her friends, had killed the poor student and ruined their own lives. The student was not a person to them. That was the reason. They would have not harmed someone who they knew was a full person. He was alien to them, his fluency in Mandarin, something the kids never considered. The student had snuffled loudly. His roommate had told the courtroom through tears and through a Mandarin interpreter that she thought he had a cold. There was one photo that Gordon looked at again and again of little Sanchez and her co-defendants in trial. They slumped with tough kid postures, and they all wore glasses. He was her teacher, and he never once saw Sanchez put on glasses. Their public defenders probably insisted they order them, and it was among the few health services you could get in county jail, a pair of prescription eyeglasses. Or maybe the lawyers went to Walgreens and bought them one-strength-fits-all readers. The photo of them in their glasses, bored and distracted at their own murder trial, made Gordon hate Sanchez. The glasses were meant to alter the jury's perception, to bend the truth. But he was disgusted with himself for this sudden hate, and maybe guilt and innocence weren't even a real axis. Things went wrong in people's lives. Reading about her case, Gordon felt he was trying to cross an 8-lane freeway on foot. He had his argument worked out about why she was a victim when he found an article that quoted a youth authority counselor who testified that he'd overheard Sanchez talking about the crime. "We didn't even get anything off the nip," Sanchez had said. And beyond that, I think there's an issue of empathy at play here. At one point in the story, hopefully not to go into too many spoilers, bad things happen to the last remaining members of Romy's family, the only members of anywhere she really has much contact with anymore. And she's hyperventilating and depressed and wants to be in contact with her son. And, all of the guards are completely dismissive. And they're like, well, if you wanted to be a mother, you shouldn't have committed a crime. And I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, nobody's saying we need to let this woman out of prison right now to be reunited with her son. But there's something to be said about how easy it is to justify losing empathy for other people. I mean, that even somebody who commits something so heinous can still be a human being and still have these legitimate feelings about the people in her life. And I just feel like lack of empathy is a bad thing in this world. That's my take. I don't know. And of course there's a difference, I think, between the crimes that don't involve murder and the ones that do, and both are sort of chronicled in this book. And again, I don't really think it's too didactic. I think it just sort of comes up in the flow of the book mostly through Romy's interactions with people. And a lot more of the book is not about prison at all, but about Romy and others, to an extent, thinking about their pasts and about what brought them to this place. And there's a lot of beautiful descriptive writing about San Francisco, which is the setting of this novel. And so overall, I really appreciated a lot of this, although to a degree I think it was a little bit unfocused. And particularly, I think I would have done away with something that Kushner brings up in this book about similarities that apparently she was interested in between Thoreau and Ted Kaczynski, and there are parts in this book that are from Kaczynski's diaries, and I'm like, I don't know what English major tangent you're on, but I think that's just going a little off the rails. So I guess I don't think it's necessarily as strong as I hoped it would be, but there was still some really intriguing characters and things to think about in this book. Next, I want to talk about the final book on my Sammy Rohr list for this month. The second to final one I pointed out earlier in the video was When They'll Come For Us We'll Be Gone. This one is A Thousand Darknesses, Lies and Truth in Holocaust Fiction by Ruth Franklin. And it is a short little book that goes into dissecting Holocaust literature and what it all means and what to get out of it. I will read from the flap. What is the difference between writing a novel about the Holocaust and fabricating a memoir? Are Holocaust writings, by their very nature, exempt from criticism and interpretation? Do narratives about the Holocaust have a special obligation to be truthful, that is, faithful to the facts of history? Is a fictional account of the Holocaust, in the words of Elie Wiesel, an insult to the dead? In this provocative study, Ruth Franklin investigates these questions as they arise in the most significant works of Holocaust writing. From Tadeusz Borowski's Auschwitz stories to Jonathan Safran Foer's postmodernist family history. Franklin argues that the memory-obsessed culture of the last few decades has led to a mistaken focus on testimony as the most valid form of Holocaust writing. As even the most canonical texts have come under scrutiny for their fidelity to the facts, we have lost sight of the essential role that imagination plays in the creation of any literary work, including the memoir. In sustained and fluent analysis, Franklin provides powerful new interpretations of memoirs by Elie Wiesel and Primo Levi, novels by writers such as Piotr Rawitz, Jerzy Kosinski, W.G. Sebald, and Wolfgang Koppen, and the film Schindler's List. Written by a gifted journalist and literary critic, this graceful and wide-ranging account offers a lucid view of the role of memory and imagination in Holocaust literature that also illuminates broader questions about history, politics, and truth. So yeah, I'm very intrigued, and I think one thing maybe you could have noticed by my reading is that these are some classic Holocaust studies, and most of them I actually haven't read. So, for somebody who talks about being a little burnt out by the Holocaust appearing in so much writing. Maybe this book will encourage me to pick some of those up, but mostly I'm really interested in literary analysis from this perspective. And finally, this is definitely a book I would really like to finish before next Saturday because of a certain adaptation that's coming on HBO. This is Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury. I actually acquired this book last September because in honor of Banned Books Week, the DC Public Library hid this title and 5 other dystopian titles, several copies of them, throughout the city. And we had this big scavenger hunt with clues online every day, and all of the books had special little covers so you could tell what they were. And so this was the 5th book that I was able to pick up. I picked it up from an open house at Georgetown University, and the library had a table there, and there was the book right on it, and the librarian happily handed it to me. And the crazy thing is that back in January I decided that I'd want to read one of these books per month in the order that I found them. And then lo and behold, I realized after I decided that HBO would be airing its adaptation of Fahrenheit 451 in May. So it just turned out to be perfect timing. Great time to read this book. I'll link to the trailer below. The tone and the acting, I don't know, just seemed to really grab me. It seems like it'll have an interesting aesthetic. I guess I'm a little bit of a stickler for, sucker anyway, for dystopian fiction. So we'll see how this goes. So that about covers it for me now. Another thing that's happening on Saturday that I'm very much excited for is the Gaithersburg Book Festival. It's one of my annual local book festivals, and this one's actually pretty big. It's gaining a lot of clout. One person I know who's going to be there is Madeline Miller with her new book Circe, which is really making the rounds in the literary fiction world, but I actually think I'm going to forego that book. I don't know, I'm going to be a hipster about it, I guess. Part of it is it does look interesting, and I've heard great reviews, but it doesn't necessarily grab my interest as much as some other books. And, you know, I have this little rule thing for myself where, you know, I want to get one book and get it signed by the author, but, you know, I don't want to go overboard. And besides, I think the book that I'm most interested in, the talk and the signing are happening concurrently with Madeline Miller. So on the bright side, I think that I'll get a good seat and quickly get my book signed because everyone's going to be over at the Circe stuff. And anyway, yes, my battery seems to be completely going now, so thanks so much for watching, everyone, and I'll see you next time.